Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, staring at the phone that hadn't rung in 3 weeks. Her son lived just an hour away, her daughter even closer. Yet the house had never felt so far from them. The last time she called, her son said he was busy with work, and her daughter promised to visit soon. Soon never came. Birthdays passed quietly now, and the only voice that filled the room was the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Once, she had been the center of their world. She remembered staying up all night when they were sick, cooking their favorite meals, cheering at every school performance. She had believed, like all mothers do, that love given freely would one day return in kind. But as she grew older, it seemed the world had moved on without her. She wasn't angry, just hollow. One morning, she sat by the window with her tea, watching sunlight spill across the table, and she thought, what do you do when the children you raised forget you? She could have chosen bitterness. Many would. But that day, she chose something else. Calm. It didn't come easily, but it began with a single decision: to stop waiting for someone else to make her happy. The first thing she did was accept reality without resentment. It wasn't that her children hated her. They were simply busy, distracted by their own lives, their own burdens. She whispered to herself, "They're living the life I wanted for them." That simple sentence softened her heart. Instead of focusing on the absence, she began to focus on gratitude. That her children were healthy, working, surviving. She stopped expecting them to fill the silence. The second thing she did was reclaim her own life. She looked around her quiet house and saw possibilities where she used to see emptiness. She joined a local gardening club, something she'd once loved but given up after marriage. The first day, her hands trembled as she introduced herself, but by the third meeting, she found herself laughing again. The dirt beneath her fingernails, the smell of earth, it grounded her. It reminded her she was still alive, still capable of growing something new. Evelyn also learned the power of setting emotional boundaries. She stopped overcalling, stopped checking if her children had read her messages. Love doesn't mean chasing, she told herself. It means standing strong even when others drift. She realized that begging for attention only deepened her pain. Instead, she decided that when her children reached out, whenever that might be, she would greet them with warmth, not guilt. Love without demand was her new quiet rebellion. The next change came unexpectedly. A neighbor named June invited her to a morning walk. At first, Evelyn hesitated. She wasn't used to talking much anymore. But she went. Those morning walks became her sanctuary. They talked about small things, flowers, books, recipes, and somehow those small things stitched her loneliness together. Through June, Evelyn learned that family isn't only blood. Sometimes the people who heal you come later in life, like gentle miracles disguised as strangers. She also found joy in creating new routines. Every evening, she wrote one happy memory in a notebook, something that made her smile that day, no matter how small. One night, it was the smell of rain. Another, a kind word from a shopkeeper. Over time, those pages became a garden of moments, proof that her life was still full, even if her house wasn't. Months passed, and something unexpected happened. One Sunday, her son called. He sounded tired, almost apologetic. "Mom, I've been meaning to visit," he said softly. Evelyn smiled. "It's okay, dear. I know life gets busy." There was no bitterness in her tone, only calm. He paused, maybe expecting the usual guilt, and when it didn't come, he said, "I'll come next weekend." And he did. Her daughter came a few weeks later, too. Evelyn didn't lecture them about neglect or hurt. She simply welcomed them with her usual warmth, her house smelling of cinnamon and tea. That day, as her children sat at her table again, she realized something profound. When you stop demanding love, it returns on its own, freely, sincerely. Evelyn had learned that peace wasn't about changing her children. It was about changing her heart. She no longer clung to the role of the forgotten mother. She had become her own companion, her own source of comfort. The silence that once suffocated her now felt sacred. To other parents who felt ignored, she wished she could whisper this truth. Don't chase what's drifting away. Pour your energy into what still blooms. Be kind, be calm, and trust that life has a way of coming full circle. In the end, Evelyn didn't just find happiness, she found freedom. Her worth was no longer tied to who called or who visited. She had built a life that felt full even when it was quiet. The loneliness that once haunted her became solitude, gentle, peaceful, and her own. And so, every morning as the sun rose over her small garden, she would smile to herself and think, I may be old, but I am still here, still growing, still enough. Because sometimes the most powerful thing an aging parent can do when their children forget them is not to cry or beg, but to live beautifully, calmly, and unapologetically for themselves.